Using the techniques we've learned with watercolor, we're going to be creating a winter landscape, and we're going to be using a lot of different techniques to create our winter landscape, and everyone's going to look a little bit different. So the first thing you need is your piece of watercolor paper. You're going to notice on your watercolor paper that there's a little bit of a texture to it, and that texture is called the tooth of the paper, and that texture holds the water on the in the watercolor really nicely. So on the other side, you don't really want to write your name on the tooth side. You want to write your name on the smooth side. Go ahead and write your teacher code as well, and then flip your paper over. The first thing we're going to decide is if we want our paper to be vertical or if you want your paper to be horizontal. So thinking about these two dimensions, if you have your paper vertical, you're going to see more of the trees because you're going to have room for more of the length of the tree, and you're going to have less land showing. But if you do your paper horizontally, you're going to have shorter trees, less of the trunk showing, but more land. So for example, this is one that does, it's a different season, it's not winter, but you can see more land. You might have room for more trees. So for this one, I think I'm gonna do mine horizontal only because I've done this one vertical, but vertical is a really great option. The first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a horizon line, and I want my horizon line to be about the bottom third of my paper. So find my halfway mark and go a little bit below that. And I'm not gonna make it perfectly straight, I'm gonna make it a little bit curved. Okay. Now I'm going to use the masking technique, and I'm gonna mask off some trees on my page. I want my trees to begin in my land somewhere and end off of the page. And I would recommend when you peel your tape off to put this on your pant leg a couple times just to get a little bit of lint on it, and that will help peel off the tape at the end so that it doesn't stick too much. So I'm gonna do a tree here, and you can even use your scissors to tear that off if you want to. You need to have at least 3 trees, maybe 4. I'll do this one a little closer. This is a little bit of a thicker tape. I'll do one more back here in the background. Okay. Now we need to think about if we're going to create a landscape at dusk or in the morning, what kinds of colors do you want to use in your landscape? In this landscape, I used cool colors and a little bit of magenta. In this landscape, I used more warm colors. It creates a totally different feel. You can have clouds showing. Maybe you want to do the salt technique to kind of look like snow. Maybe it's going to be a really nice subtle sunset. All right, so I'm going to do a cool colored background. And so I think I'm going to put some water in the colors that I plan on using. You need to use at least 2 colors in your sky. At least 2 colors. And you could even use your lid if you have it to mix up colors, although these colors that we're using are already pretty mixed. So I think I'm gonna just use them right out of there. I'm gonna turn my paper sideways just so it's a little bit easier to paint so that I'm not reaching over my land. In fact, you could flip it upside down too. Just remember you're painting over this tape. So I'm going to start with a really deep, dark purple. And I'm gonna paint right along that horizon line. And I'm trying to paint fairly quickly because I don't want this line of purple to dry before I add another color to it. So I'm gonna actually fade this out a little bit and make it a light purple. And I'm remembering to paint all the way across. And I'm remembering to rinse my brush. It's a little dark. If you notice that something's a little bit dark, just add a little more water to it. Okay, so I am using the blending technique where I'm blending colors together, but you could also paint, you could leave some pockets of white showing to look like clouds. You could leave a pocket of white showing to look like a moon in your sky if you want it to be a nighttime sky. You could use salt. There are a lot of techniques that you might want to try. So I think I'm going to leave my moon. Another technique you might try is the wet on wet technique, where you wet the page first and then drop color on the page. You can use a variety of techniques. Okay. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna create a shadow on the snow so that it looks like our trees are leaving a shadow. When we create a shadow, we wanna create a mixture, maybe like a bluish purple, maybe even adding a touch of black to kind of gray it a little bit, make it a little bit more dull. But the key to making our shadow is we want it to be fairly light. We don't want it to be super, super dark. We want it to look like we can kind of see the snow through it. So I've created this color. It's kind of a light blue, but I added a touch of black to it. And so it's kind of got a gray tone. So I'm gonna take this and I'm going to paint directly below my tree trunks. And I'm gonna paint them all in one direction. So you can see in this page, I painted all to the left. You could paint them all to the right. Since my moon is up here and it's probably helping to cast a shadow, I'm gonna have my tree shadows go this way. So they're going to only be as thick as the tree. And they are gonna go all the way off the page. Ooh, this is looking good. It's just a really light shadow. Okay. When you're finished, you can take your work to the drying rack. Now that my watercolor's dry, I'm gonna be carefully peeling off the tape. And if it tears a little bit, that's okay. It'll give your tree a little bit of texture, but do take it slow. If you see any pencil lines under your trees, go ahead and erase those because we don't want those to show. And you're gonna notice there's a little bit of a space in between your tree and your shadow. So we're gonna connect that with a shadow along the edge of our tree. We're gonna be using a type of brush called a flat brush, and that's gonna give you a really crisp edge along the sides of your trees. And we're gonna use a shadow color that was similar to our shadow on the snow. So I'm gonna mix up a little bit of blue, maybe a little bit of purple, even a little bit of black. And I'm gonna use this on the side of my tree. So I'm gonna make sure that my shadow falls on the same side, and I'm gonna choose the left side. And I'm gonna paint a line that goes all the way down to the top of my shadow on the snow. Using my small detail brush, now I'm gonna get to add details. Details could be tracks in the snow. Maybe you wanna mix up a color to look like some different plants or berries coming through your snow. Maybe an evergreen tree in the background. So you can get creative with what you do. I'm gonna do some dark green kind of grass coming through the snow in some different places. And on these, I'm gonna add some dark red berries. Another thing you could do would be adding a little, like a little bush. And I'm gonna do some footprints in the snow. The last thing we need to do to complete our landscape is add some details to our birch trees. You can see that these two are already completed and how they look so much better when they have a little bit more detail added onto them. So I'm gonna be using a thin line, ultrafine line point Sharpie. And the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm simply going to outline the edges of my trees. And something I like to do is, even if you see a little part where the tape kind of pulled off a little more than you would have liked, go ahead and outline that too, because you can actually make it look more realistic when you outline those little bumps and it doesn't look perfectly straight, because trees are not all perfectly straight. So remember to go all the way down until you hit the top part of the shadow, and then I'm gonna actually draw that kind of curvy line underneath it too. So when you observe a birch tree, you might see some little parts that are look like little holes that have some lines around them. You can create some repeating lines that are horizontal. Some can be long, some can be short. You might even see some that are diagonal. Some might be thick. It's just really up to you what you decide to do, and they're all going to look a little different. You could also add some small branches coming off of your birch trees, but remember, when you create a branch, you're gonna want the part that connects to the tree to be a little bit thicker. And then you're gonna wanna use that Y tree technique to make some little branches. So start with a line and then make it a little bit thicker where it connects to the tree. Like so. Now that my work is complete, I'm going to sign my first and last name and the year in the bottom corner. Use your best handwriting, but if you accidentally make a mistake, don't cross it out, because that will actually make it look a little bit worse than if you just made a little mini mess up.